Afternoon, Craig.
Hi, Leanne. How you doing?
Hi. Thanks. I'm so glad we got a hold of you. Yes, that's great.
No problem.
I hear that you might
We've just got a terrible
Yeah.
signal, so I don't know what's happened. So let's box on, and if we have to ring back again, that's cool. Fine by me. How are you? Good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm just glad to hear your voice, Craig, because I was looking forward to this, and we were going to speak with you yesterday, so thank goodness you're there. So should we talk a little bit about that song we just played? Let's get a little sentimental, because this is one that is very much etched in my memory from the 70s. Is it one of your favourites?
Yeah, I had heaps and heaps of. I was very, very lucky, as you know, because there's a heck of a lot of singles that I had that were all top 15s or something like that. That was probably about second, third, maybe about the third or fourth hit for me. That would have been 50 odd years ago now that one came out.
Yeah. Does it feel that long?
No, not at all. Not at all. The body says yes, it does, but the mind says no. Still feels like yesterday. I can remember heaps and heaps of stuff, like it was just a few days ago. Because it's such a good time.
Oh, it would have been wonderful. And you started out in Dunedin. Let's go right back. So you were working in a bank, but obviously rock and roll was calling, yeah? Yeah,
well, I had some mates. I went to King's High in Dunedin, and some mates there, a couple of suburbs away. As you get new friends when you go to high school. So my mate at school, he had a band, and some guys had a band out in a place called Anderson's Bay in Dunedin. And I just sort of towed along with them. Used to go to their rehearsals at night. We used to have fun. When they're only 15 or 16, and I just sort of got into it from there.
Yeah, because you
joined their band.
Yeah, the band was called Clap.
Clap, or that was the band. We couldn't use that on a Sunday, of course. When we were doing the YMCA, that wasn't allowed, so we had to have another name as well.
Right. Okay. and then you had Fantasy. Didn't you?
Yeah, Fantasy was the sort of start of it all. And I was starting to look like this could be fun, and should I have a little go at this full time? We had a guy called Mike Brown who used to be with the Human Instinct, and he came to Dunedin.
Right.
Left the Human Instinct, joined us, and then he knew all about what you had to do for stagecraft and stuff like that. So we started to move along that line, and I had some real good breaks then. Very quickly, my future producer, Peter Dawkins, the late Peter Dawkins, who was one of New Zealand's greatest producers.
Yes.
He came to town with Johnny Farnham. This was when Johnny would just put out Sadie, and they came to what was the Aggie Hall, cultural hall, and it used to put about 2,000 kids in on a Saturday night, and there'd be 2 or 3 bands. He came with John and heard me sing that night with the band, and never said anything to me. I never even knew him then, never introduced himself or anything. And it was he who called me 18 months, 2 years later, and said, "You're the man. If you want to record, we'll do it." So it was great. But without Peter being there that night, Leanne, I would never had a recording career.
Goodness me.
Never.
What was your reaction when you got that call?
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. But then, also, I didn't really know the importance of it, because you're just young. You think these things, this is what's going to happen. If you go thinking you're going to be a star and it doesn't happen, I don't know what I would have thought, but it just did.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is fantastic, because straight away he said, look, what we did, we took the band I was in Christchurch at that stage up to Wellington to record. Excuse me. And that record that came out there was in 1969, and that was a hit. So we just went from there, and then he rang me again. He said, look, you're probably going to be better off on your own. And I said, well, you're the boss.
Right.
We'll do that.
You trusted him.
So I left. Yeah, absolutely. Well, at that age, I wouldn't have a clue about up on stage, singing, and that sort of thing. All the other intricacies of it, which you learn pretty quickly later. You don't know those sort of things at that age. Just think this is the way it goes. So I was very lucky.
You were, but also, obviously, you had this talent. Was singing something that was with you from a young child, and did you play guitar when you were young as well, or you just was concentrating on vocals?
No, not at all. Of music in my family was not huge, but it was there. My grandfather on my mum's side, he had a banjo band in Dunedin. When he was, that would have been at the turn of the century, probably. And that was a very popular band, apparently. My dad used to play some drums, mainly in school bands. My mum was a good pianist. I learnt piano for about 3 years, from about 5 till I was 8 years old, and that was it. So I had no inkling at all that I would be able to hold a tune.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, but you've got a great range, and you actually could sing quite high. You had a good pitch, didn't you? You could take your voice right up if you needed to.
Well, at that stage, I didn't realise that, but I had a great range. It was really, really quite large. So I could get up there, and some of the notes were top C's and things like that. So that having that range was good, because that's what pop music was all about in those days. You need to be able to get up there and get down there, that sort of thing.
That's right. It was very melodic, wasn't it, in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they sound simple songs, and but when it came out to go out on the road and actually sing them with bands used to say, these are actually quite complex little songs to put together, and rehearse and that. So they sounded simple, but they were well written. I mean, they were written. I never wrote myself. So these were all written by some of the great singer-songwriters or songwriting people in the world. We used to have guys from the UK. We had guys from Tin Pan Alley in New York. They would all have songs for us to have a listen to and see if we wanted to record them. It's great.
One that stands out for me was Viva Bobby Joe, very early hit for you. That was a cover, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was done originally by the Equals. So what we used to do there, we used to get HMV, as it was then became EMI. They used to have all of these singles come into New Zealand. Be stacks of them, be 20, 30 a week would come in from all over the world, and we just flicked through, listen to the first few bars, the middle bars, and the end, and see if we heard anything in there that we liked. And the Equals 45 was in that pile. And we liked that, and Peter Dawkins said that would be good for your band. Your band could play that really well. So really what we had there was that, and that was the hit. That was in 1969. But on the B-side of that was a really lovely little sort of like, it was a little ska song called Rudy's in Love.
Yeah.
And that was a great song to play and great song to sing as well. So I was a bit lucky.
It's interesting because then you went on, you were big in TV, and Happenin' was the show that everyone watched, of my generation anyway. And it was Peter Sinclair, wasn't it, fronting that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pete was the compere on that. One of the most professional man I've ever met in the television and music industry. His radio shows were absolutely dynamite. His television work was like he would rehearse everything to himself. You'd see him in the corner with a cigarette in one hand and a notebook in the other hand, and he would just rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. It didn't sound like that when he was performing on TV, but he was a consummate professional, and he was a lovely, lovely guy to myself and later on to my family.
Right. Yes, I agree. He was very professional, very slick, and we lost something big when we lost him. I think he was wonderful.
You're right. There wasn't at that stage. There was no one else really around that was as professional and as good as he was. I don't think. He's very lucky to be in that era and have him comparing the shows.
Yeah, he was so upbeat too.
Yep.
Yep. And so you were on Happenin'. So you were actually, you had a spot on that, and that happened when Lee Grant, because I remember him very well. So he went across to the UK, and then you're appearing regularly on Happenin'.
Yep. He was before me. There were two people before me that were huge. I thought were huge stars. There was Lee. I never really knew him. He was just gone before I sort of kicked in, but I followed him, and I also followed Shane Hales,
yes,
who was a big star for a couple of years with St. Paul and all that. So I sort of kicked in after those guys. The difference I had was that I had a really long recording career. Those guys had some wonderful hits, but there might have been two or three of them. But I was lucky. I just had, they just kept on coming out year after year after year, which was fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's partly due to your talent, Craig.
Yeah, but isn't it funny? Talent, look, I tell you, you do exactly the same. When you start these things, you don't even think about that. You don't even think that you're talented. And it's not until you've been successful for a number of years that you start to sit back and think, well, hang on, you got to face up to the facts that there must have been some talent there, otherwise it wouldn't have gone on that long. It can't be all luck. So yeah, I did at the end. In the end, I thought, I knew the range. I could sing, and I could sing in tune. So yeah, I must have had a little bit of talent.
Of course you did. Plus you looked amazing, and your hair was divine, so lush and lustrous.
Thank you.
Wasn't it though? I mean, you really were. You were the pin-up boy for many years.
Well,
for youngsters.
Yeah. Apparently there were many thousands of kids out there who had me pinned to their wall. Some of them secretively. They used to tell me in later life. In recent years, when I see some of these people, and they're all around my age now, and they say, oh, yeah, I used to love you, and I had to hide your photo or hide your poster in the inside of my wardrobe so my mum or dad wouldn't be able to see it. I love you too. You're great.
Actually, those were the days where you did have to battle with your parents to get up your pop posters on your walls. It was a hard battle. They didn't want you destroying the wallpaper, but I used to have Mark Bolan and the Bay City Rollers and you. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. So look, it's interesting because I don't think a lot of people will see you as a controversial figure, but the next song we're going to play was a little bit hot to handle. It had some interesting lyrics, and I think you'll know what I'm talking about, Star-Crossed Lovers. Yep. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, those were the days when it was there were no private radio stations as such. It was all AM, national broadcasting. So they owned all the stations. They ran all the stations. So and they were run by some pretty staid old men.
Yes.
And ladies.
And brown cardigans and long socks.
Absolutely. And so Star-Crossed Lovers, of course, was a song written about a young girl, a young boy of two different faiths, and would they ever be able to get together? One of the faiths of one of them was a Roman Catholic, and that. So when these things were played before they ever went on air and censored, so to speak, the powers to be in the NZBC decided that they would have to go to the Catholic Church and play this and see that they were okay with it going to air.
Wow.
And that's what happened. And it took about it took over 3 or 4 weeks to get their okay to play it, and the radio guys would never play it until they had said yes. And of course, it came out, and it was a Neil Sedaka song. He wrote it, and it was just a huge hit.
It was number one for 4 weeks or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is quite a long time in those days, because things used to go on and off pretty quickly.
Yes, it did seem to be like that.
Yeah. So it was a beautiful little song. Interesting song, because I'd never really sung anything like that, because that wasn't what I was brought up with. We were a rhythm and blues band, basically, in the early days. So we played all of the African American music that we could get our hands on in Dunedin. That's how we started. So to do something like Star-Crossed Lovers was entirely different, quite weird, really, but it turned out very, very well.
We've got Craig on the line right now. What's it like hearing that back again?
It's interesting, because there's a voice of a very young man. The little monologue, pardon it. Gosh.
Yeah.
I sound like I'm about 13 years old.
Well, how old would you have been at that time?
At that time there, I would have been 20.
Yeah.
19 or 20.
Young boy.
Yeah.
Pretty young.
Well, it was, I remember them all dearly, because, they were all I knew, those songs, for, 7 or 8 years. So, in each one of them, I sang most of these songs on stage in my live shows and stuff like that. So it was around me all of the time. And because it was such a big hit, people would just love it. And they love talking about it, and they all remember it, and they remember half the words to it. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Quite crazy.
It's interesting you tell me that, because you're working in Arrowtown now, and you say almost every day, people say, Craig, we remember you. You were terrific.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
It's special, because it's such a long time ago. When it's 52 odd years ago since my first sort of single hit that I had by myself. So that these people still remember and are still so charming. And I have very few people are nasty. 99% of the people that I meet have great memories of those days. They were wonderful, wonderful times, because it was early times, early television, early recordings, those sorts of things. And they were all teenagers at that stage. So people they're lovely, and their memories of the places that they met me is quite phenomenal. I wouldn't remember, obviously, half of them, but they all know exactly the hall, exactly the day, exactly what was happening, who else was on the bill, all that sort of thing. It was quite phenomenal. So to me, I just love it. I just think, if this is the legacy that you leave, fantastic. Yeah,
it must be really heartwarming. And
it is.
You'd be proud. You should be proud.
I'm proud, and my family, my grandchildren know all about it now. They're old enough to recognise what had gone on, and recently they've just seen a piece of that in real life. So yeah, it's great. It's just something that I'll always treasure. My mum and dad, it was absolutely wonderful. Then they used to come to the Loxing disc shows with us and that sort of thing. So they were part of it. We managed to be able to make them part of it and see what that life was like, because it wasn't an easy life, great life, but it wasn't an easy life. And my wife and I, Jo, have been together since we were like 16, 17. It wasn't easy for them either, but they appreciate it. They appreciated it. They appreciate the opportunities that business gives me to this day, actually.
And what a journey it would have been for Jo, starting from a young teenager and watching suddenly your life just take this turn. And
Yep.
and suddenly it's like, wowza, what's happened, what's happening to Craig? And yet here
Yep.
you are, you've managed to keep it together, which is astonishing. And now you're working in real estate in Arrowtown, and you have a company with your son, which I think is pretty special. Is that an enjoyable time for you?
It's great, yeah. It's nice. It's changed a little since we started, and people don't really work so much as individuals anymore. We always decided, or it was Joe and I for a start off, we decided that we would always work as a pair, as a couple. So we sort of were in the start of the teams that you see now advertised selling real estate. So we did that from day one. And also, we decided that when we were going to do this, and when we'd come back from Auckland to Dunedin first off, that when we worked again, that we weren't going to work separately, because we were always apart, with the singing and then the other stuff that I used to do. That we decided that, right, from now on, let's spend some time together, and if we have to work together, we'll work together. So we've done that since 2001. And it's worked out all right.
What do you mean, all right?
You'd have to go.
Yeah, because when you see your partner every day in a work environment, and then they're there in the evening, not many couples can actually do that successfully without having a blow up occasionally.
Oh, right. Well, real estate's great because you got to be available 24/7, but you're not working every hour of the day, so it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But we've always done that because in our early life we had to be very private. You just couldn't just roll out and go anywhere. It just didn't work. So we always learned to live privately. We learned to raise our family privately, and that's always helped because it makes it easier.
Do you mean because you were so recognised that people would stop you all the time? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so
you've got to be careful what people will say in front of your family in terms of, because some people just get so excited, they say silly things, that can upset your family and that sort of thing. But we realised that, so we didn't have a real problem. But you just got to be a bit careful.
Yeah, I get that. It's funny, because I was talking with the producer, Shane, and this is a lovely story, but he said to me, he had a poster of you on his wall when he was growing up, and he actually took a picture of you to the hairdresser and said, "Please make my hair look like Craig Scott." That hair, the amount of hair in that hairdo was a number of hairdressers over the years have told me that. Once they knew who I was and everything, they said, "My God, we used to have people come in here, guys come in here and say, 'Give me that Craig Scott hairdo.'" But it's hardly a surprise because it was a great do. How would you describe that hair, Craig? Or did it just naturally grow
like a lion's mane, wasn't it?
Oh, there was a lot.
It was pretty full on, all right. But it sort of was in character for what you did in those days, wasn't it?
Everyone had long hair. Everyone.
Sure. Yeah. God, yeah. No, it's good.
I liked it. I think bring back the long hair on men. I'm starting a campaign on that. I love that 70s look.
Oh dear.
Oh, I'm serious. Now, Craig, getting back, because you had some other key moments, like so it's kind of strange because you were still riding pretty high, but then you decided to take a step back, did you? And didn't you? And you sort of said, "Look, I don't think I want to do this anymore for a while. I'm going to move in another direction." Was that quite a hard decision to come to?
Not particularly. As you go through. As we went through the early part of the career in that, so we got to about 1978 when we did call it quits. We had some decisions to make. We had nowhere else to go or really do in New Zealand, so to speak, and you couldn't base yourself in New Zealand and travel and do the same kind of work overseas. So we had offers from the UK and we had offers from the States to go and do that. By then we had two young children, and so we were quite blunt about our decision, and I said to Joe, well, look, what are we going to do? all we're going to do is we're going to go away. We could be hugely famous. We could fall on our backsides. A lot of it's a big lottery in show business. I'm sure there were several thousand kids who had as good a voice and even better voice than me. Breaks.
It's a moment in time kind of thing, isn't it, Craig? Oh dear, we had worried about this line, didn't we? He said the reception wasn't great. Let's hope that Craig can come back. He's just discussing his decision to part company with the music biz. We'll just see if we can get Craig back. I guess it's just a reception thing. You know what we'll do? We're going to take his song. Let's take When Jojo Runs, and we'll get Craig back on the line. And that was When Jojo Runs, Craig Scott, who's on the line now. Craig, yeah, we had a bit of reception issue there, but you're back.
Yeah. Another dropout.
Oh, another dropout. Speaking of dropping out, that ties in perfectly with what we were talking about. You said you kind of reached this crossroads and had a chat with Joe and made a call to change things up. What happened then?
Well, basically at that point then we decided that we wouldn't. I'd back out of that side of the business. I started, I was good friends with a guy called Mike Corliss, who's recently just passed away, unfortunately. And Michael was one of the young entrepreneurs who used to put shows together like the Happening Show around New Zealand, stuff like that. And I worked with him for a long time. To cut a long story short, we decided that we would get together and work as a team. We started a company called New Music Management, which became one of the most famous of the promotional companies in New Zealand, looking after all the rock rooms, the big rock rooms, hotels and everything. So I think at its best time, we looked after about 20 of the great bands, all the Toy Loves and Citizen bands and all those people like that. Put them all out into those rooms, 20 rooms. So it was 20 rooms and about 20 major bands we used to look after every week. It was fantastic. It was great fun.
Oh, I didn't know you had connections with Toy Love and Citizen Band.
Yep. I've been on the road with Toy Love. I've been on the road with Jimmy Barnes looking after them. And the Wild Men of Music were the loveliest guys in the world. I couldn't believe it. It was good fun and I loved meeting it. So that moved on there because I was managed by the Levin Clark agency, Benny Levin and Russell Clark. So we moved into looking after with them some of the really major international stars like Rod Stewart, Elton John. We used to, when they came to town, we would be the agency that would do all of the local work for them. And we met all those guys. They were great guys. There's a whole lot of other acts like that. So that was a lot of fun.
Interesting.
I enjoyed all of that.
Interesting what you said, that they considered wild men and yet in person they're big teddy bears.
Oh, they were just fantastic. I remember, because Jimmy Barnes was notorious. And I said, they said, do you want to go on the road with them? I said, yeah, I don't mind doing that. That'd be great. And he was just, I don't know whether he was going through a quieter time, but he was fantastic. And he had some T-shirts going up Main Street, which was a major rock room. You'll remember it right at the top of Queen Street there.
I do.
And he came on stage for his last show up there, and he had this little black T-shirt with "I'm in the Craig Scott fan club," because they all knew what I did. And it was great. It was lovely.
Oh,
nicely cut by him.
That is delightful. So the shirt read, "I'm in the Craig Scott fan club."
Yeah.
Oh, that's delightful.
Cool. So after that, basically, we then moved into, we bought the first of the home videos into New Zealand. That's from a manufacturing point of view. So I started in that with the guys. Half the company went into that. So I moved out of music for quite some time and did a home video for another 5 years with just private companies. And then in 1985, I went to join Warner Brothers in New Zealand in their home video division. and some of their movie division as well, but mainly in the home video. And I was there as the managing director there with Tim Murdoch. Remember Tim Murdoch and the music side of it?
Oh, yes.
Well, he was kind of like my mentor, and there's another tough guy, hard man, who was an absolute angel and became one of my dearest friends. He looked after me and made sure I knew how Warner Brothers worked, because that was a major, obviously, film company and music company. And what did we do? Stayed there for 15 years until I retired from there in 2000 and left Auckland.
Yeah, so that was quite pioneering. Again, you were in something that was starting up, this video scene, which was huge. And of course, now, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to, you can't find a video shop, can you?
There's probably one in Christchurch left and one in Auckland, and that's about it. But we went from nothing. There were no video stores when we started to bring the product in and manufacture the tapes, the VHS and the Betamax, as they were in those early days. So we had to start it all, and I remember we went to all of the brown and white goods stores around the place. They'd be like small Noel Leeming stores in those days, and set those up with libraries and stuff like that. No, it was good fun, really good fun. But I've always managed from the time I was about 16 or 17, a bit later, maybe 18, stay in some form of entertainment business, which was really good.
Yeah, it is good.
Nice.
I have to say, Craig, I think there'd be a lot of people who pay good money to see you sing again. Would you ever consider doing that?
I've had a couple of local boys, namely David Gent, bass guitar extraordinaire.
Yes.
And we talked about it the other night, because I've always said no, and I've only ever done one show since I basically left Auckland, and that was a Luther reunion show in Dunedin, which was absolutely a great night, and I did about 4 songs for them, because all of those guys were my friends in Dunedin. And I started off singing with those, playing in different bands, but they were all around at the same time. So that's the only time I'd worked again.
Right.
So we were having a little chat at a quiz night at the Arrowtown Athenaeum Hall the other night. And I think, if I remember, after a couple of red wines, that I probably said, yeah, I'll consider that. We'll talk about it later, more towards Christmas. So I might get back and do something there, just a few songs.
Oh, it would be terrific. And, like I say, not just for Arrowtowners, but I think people would love to see you. And I think there is this kind of thirst for nostalgia at the moment, in a way.
Yep.
I think people like going back and looking at those times, because a lot, the 60s and 70s were very interesting times, weren't they? They
were. Well, they were like after Presley, they were groundbreaking times. And I was very fortunate to be involved in them. But I'm also very cognizant of the fact that older guys and ladies sometimes don't sound anywhere near as good as they did, 50 years ago. So I'm a bit reticent sometimes to think that how it might sound and that sort of thing. So there would be a bit of rehearsal going on, and maybe a few more backup singers than you would normally.
That's what you do. I mean, look, people are forgiving. I think that you would have a lot of support in this community, because
it would be good. Yeah, it would be good to do, but it's just something that I've never done, and I guess without sounding sort of big-headed, like when I left on a huge high. It was a massive career, probably one of the biggest pop careers in New Zealand. There'd be John Rolls and Lee Grant and maybe one or two others that had a big career, but it was So I always sort of think, well, leave it there. Leave it there. Let the people have lovely memories. Don't ruin it for them.
Right. But then you get the likes of, look at Rod Stewart, who is meant to be coming back. I think maybe this year's had to put off his tours a lot. And sure, he won't look or he won't sound like those days,
No.
and people accept that. But yes, the voice is still
Sure.
there. Tell me, do you listen to much modern music? Like, do you have any favourites of today?
No, I don't really. I mean, I hear of a lot of the kids. My kids obviously talk to me about a lot of the modern acts. My grandchildren, they're like 12, 11 and 12, so they know a lot of these things as well. But no, I must say that when I sit down at YouTube at night, as I probably do once or twice a week, and just have a good old scroll through, I'm more nostalgia. I'm more nostalgic listener than listening to. I don't, because I came up in a melodic time, a lyrical and melodic time, and sometimes I just, I love it.
You pine for that.
Yeah.
I think, did you ever wish that you could just belt out a rocker occasionally? I mean, I know you did have a couple that were heavier. Did you enjoy that, cutting loose?
Well, it was very much like, I was lucky when I started that I had all that. I did all that, and I did all that in Dunedin in the first couple of years. When I first started, the American picket ships that patrolled between New Zealand and the Antarctica, they had their base in Dunedin before they opened up the air base in Christchurch. And those guys would all come in there, and there'd be African-American boys that would come in off the ship, and they would have all of the great albums and all of the great rhythm and blues artists of the time there. So we got those, and we played an awful lot of that, far more than the rest of the country did, because we had access to the music. So our bands initially started like that and played that kind of music. So I had a history of that, but then pop music's pop music, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a certain kind of music, and you either like it or you don't, and not all of it's fantastic. But yeah, I could still rattle out some. My live shows always had some good, R&B in it.
Yeah.
But mainly, I stuck to what was successful.
Well, people wanted pop. There was a thirst for it, and people wanted melody.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying.
This was a time,
Yeah, but I didn't miss it so much of not being able to actually perform that kind of music. But New Zealand is, you had to be a little potpourri, didn't you, in those days of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If you tried to be a full-on country, or you tried to be a full-on blues or something like that, there was never that market there. There wasn't a big enough market to survive.
No.
So I figured that, I'll settle a bit more middle of the road.
Yeah, and how well did it work? Great decision, Craig. And listen, we've got to go to news now. It's been delightful talking with you today.
Well, we'll do it again, huh?
Shall we? All right.
Sure. I've enjoyed it.
Let's do it. I would love to talk to you again, and maybe you can come and play some of your favourite songs, one day, and we'll have another good chat, because it's been wonderful.
Yeah. That'd be fantastic, Leanne. I appreciate you ringing me and letting me have some time around this lovely part of the world.
Yeah, it's just magic.
I've enjoyed it.
Go and enjoy the day.
Okay.
Craig Scott, thank you so much.